I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 4 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts, grade 4, and we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of adjectives and adverbs. So chapter is adjectives and adverbs. Our subject is English language arts, grade 4. And the lessons that we are focusing on under the chapter of adjectives and adverbs is to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And is the word an adjective or an adverb? All right. So an adjective, right? We said an adjective is a word that tells us about a noun. So an adjective is a word that tells us about a noun. Adjectives, they often tell us what kind or how many, right? For example, Jody saw 3 stars in the sky. So now you're asking yourself, how many stars did Jody see in the sky? And then we're going to identify the adjective as 3, because that will tell us how many stars Jody saw in the sky. So basically, the adjective, it tells us how many stars Jody saw. So which means that it's three, right? So when it comes to adjectives, right, that tells us either what kind or how many, we now specifically might mention that, for example, three is already an adjective that tells us how many, right? So it can be any number, 1, 2, 3, 50, 100, right? Any other number that we are, let's say, we're making mention of within a sentence to describe a noun, right? That will tell us how many. Can be a lot, more, most, several. That can also be an adjective that will basically tell us how many. Then we also have adjective that tells us what kind, right? What kind can be any shape, it can be weight, it can be height, it can be color, it can be what type of dress, shoe, whatever you are wearing, right? And like I said, it can either be in a form of color, can be a shape, it can be anything, right? So if we're describing maybe a dress that somebody's wearing, then we can either describe that dress as it can be brown, yellow dress, it can be a cocktail dress, it can be a church dress, any dress that you are actually describing, right? Because that tells us what kind of dress, what kind of shoe, what kind of person we are specifically talking about. So it can basically be anything. Then we have an adverb, right? And an adverb is a word that tells us about a verb. So an adverb, it is a word that tells us about about a verb, right? And adverbs, they often tell us how, they tell us when, and they tell us where, or they tell us where. For example, if we say Grace ran quickly, Grace ran quickly. So if we want to, so if we look at that sentence, it says the adverb tells us how Grace ran, right? So if we want to know how Grace ran, and then we can say quickly. So quickly is our adverb, and that tells us how. It's an adverb that tells us how Grace ran. So basically, most of our adverbs, right, that tells us how, they end in ly. Like for example, quickly, right? Quickly tells us how Grace ran. So you can't always just use ly to tell whether the word is an adjective or if a word is an adverb, though, right? For example, she arrived soon. She arrived soon, right? And soon is an adjective that doesn't even end in ly, but it tells us when she's going to arrive, which is going to be soon. And then we also have Fred has a friendly dog, right? And friendly is an adjective. Friendly, it ends with an ly, but it is an adjective and it describes the type of dog that we have, meaning that it is a friendly dog. So sometimes, right, not all adjectives, actually not all adjectives end in ly. We specifically said adjectives that tells us how, right, ends in ly. Then we also have adjectives that sometimes would end in ly, right? But we're gonna have to know what is being described or what are they telling us about. Are they telling us about the noun, or are they describing and telling us about the verb, right? Because remember, an adverb tells us about the verb, whereas an adjective, it tells us about the noun. All right. So remember, adjectives, right? It describes a noun. Nouns, it names people, animals, places, or things that is being described. They're telling us about the people, places, animals, or things, right? They are modifying it, right? And we said that adjectives can either tell us what kind of adjectives or how many adjectives. Not even adjectives, sorry, how many nouns. And if we look at an example, right, of an adjective that tells us what kind, then we can maybe say, mm, Jack as long trousers, right? So which means that long is the adjective, right? That tells us about the trousers that he has on, and it tells us what kind of trousers. He's got long trousers. Or what kind of trousers, we can say he's got brown trousers, right? It tells us what kind of trousers he has on. And then we made an example of Jody saw three stars in the sky, and that basically tells us how many. So we say Jody saw three stars in the sky, right? And the adjective, it tells us how many stars Jody saw, which is 3. And like I said, it can be 3, it can be several, it can be much, it can be more, right? But that basically just tells us how many things, whatever that you saw. All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca and we're going to continue with our tutorial, right, on adjectives and adverbs. And then we're going to do our test. All right, so we are on adjectives and adverbs, and the first lesson that we're going to be focusing on is to choose between adjectives and adverbs. All right, so we're going to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And once again, we said adjectives, it tells us about a noun, and it often tells us what kind as well as how many. And then we have an adverb, right? And we said an adverb is a word that tells us about a verb. And adverbs, they often tell us how, when, or where, right? So adverbs that tells us how, right, or asks how, they usually end in ly. They usually end in ly. Not always, but they usually do, right? For example, Grace ran quickly, right? So the adjective tells us how Grace ran, which is quickly. Sometimes we can also say, I'm coming soon. Then soon is our adverb, right? Because it tells us when. All right. So now we're going to our test, where we are going to be choosing the word that best describes the verb in bold. The verb in bold. It says Pam behaved. Do we say Pam behaves selfish or Pam behaves selfishly and should be ashamed of herself? So Pam behaved, do we say selfish or do we say Pam behaves selfishly and should be ashamed of herself? All right, so we said Pam behaved. Do we say Pam behaved selfish or selfishly? Option one or option two? All right. And if we were to choose the correct word that best describes the word in bold, which is behaved, then we can say Pam behaved selfishly and should be ashamed of herself. We're going to choose the word that best describes the noun in bold. Is no noun in bold. Did you measure? So did you measure the, do we say, did you measure the correctly amount of sugar or did you measure the correct amount of sugar for the brownies? All right, so we can then say, did you measure the correct, which is option two? Yes, well done. Correct is correct. Correct is correct. Number two is correct. So we can say, did you measure the correct amount of sugar for the brownies? So well done. Correct is is correct. So correct is correct. The young boy, do we say the young boy shyly hid in the bedroom until the guests left? Or do we say the young boy shy hid in the bedroom until the guests left? So we can say the young boy, do we say shyly hid in the bedroom? Or the young boy shy hid in the bedroom until the guests left? So now we're going to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold. So we say that the young boy shyly hid, or we say shy hid, in the bedroom until the guests left. So for example, the boy hid in the bedroom until the guests left, right? Which means that we can say how he hid, right? So we can say shyly hid, he shy hid. What type? It's almost like something that basically describes the verb in that case, in that sense. Sorry. Yes. So well done. All right, let's go to the next one. It says Mrs. Johnston's enormous German Shepherd is actually do we say a gently dog or a gentle dog? This is not us describing the noun. Is it a gently dog or a gentle dog? So Miss Johnson's enormous German Shepherd is actually a gently dog or a gentle dog. All right, and if we choose the correct word, we will then choose the correct noun that says he's a gentle dog. So well done. Option 2 is correct. Do we say Gabby correctly answered? This is now describing the verb. Do we say Gabby correctly answered all the questions on the history test, or Gabby correct answered all the questions on the history test? This is now us describing the verb. Is it Gabby correctly answered or Gabby correct answered all the questions on the history test? All right, so we will choose option 1, which means Gabby correctly answered all the questions on the history test. All right, now we're going to say, is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb, right? So for example, here it says, the storm seriously damaged Mrs. Patton's new automobile. We need to say if the word in bold is either an adjective or is it an adverb. So the storm seriously damaged Mrs. Patton's new automobile. So seriously, is it an adjective or is it an adverb? So which means that if we look at that word seriously, right, then we would say seriously is an adverb. It tells us about a verb, damaged. So our verb is damaged, which means that seriously is an adverb. That medicine left an awful taste in my mouth. Is that an adjective or an adverb? The word in bold, awful, is an adjective or an adverb? The medicine left an awful taste in my mouth. So the word awful is an adjective or an adverb. And if we were to choose the correct word, we would say it is an adjective. It is telling us about the noun. And then lastly, before we go to our test, Jennifer spoke softly. So the word softly. So Jennifer spoke softly as she comforted her friend. Is that an adjective, the word in bold, or is it an adverb? So softly, is that an adjective or is it an adverb? Jennifer spoke softly as she comforted her friend. All right, so we can then say this is an adverb. So now we're going on to our test, right? We were going to say is it either an adjective or is it an adverb? It says, is the word bold in the word is the word in bold either an adjective or is it an adverb? It says Hector plays in the shallow end of the pool, right? So Hector plays in the shallow end of the pool. And a hint is the word bold in bold describes the word that is underlined. So is that an adjective or is that an adverb? All right, so we're going to say that this is so everybody says option 2. I'm going to choose it because you guys are saying it's option 2. It is an adjective. Remember, option 2, right, is describing the verb. So the word that is underlined needs to be the verb, and then the word in bold needs to be describing that word that is underlined, right? So remember that. So option 1 is our answer. Chewy candy always sticks to my teeth. So chewy candy always sticks to my teeth, right? So the word in bold, it describes the word that is being underlined. Is this an adjective or is it an adverb? So chewy, is it an adjective or is it an adverb? So chewy candy always sticks to my teeth. Is that an adjective or an adverb? All right, so we will say it is an adjective. Describes a noun. It tells us about the noun, right? Then it says Lexi sees clearly with her new glasses. So Lexi sees clearly with her new glasses, right? Are we describing an adjective? Is this an adjective describing a noun or is it an adverb describing a verb? Lexi sees clearly with her new glasses. All right, so we can then say that this is an adverb, right? It tells us about the verb, which is sees. Robbie and Kenneth get regular exercise at track practice. So Robbie and Kenneth get regular exercise at the track practice. Is that an adjective or is it an adverb? Exercise. But now we use the word regular exercise. Is that not us? It is telling us about the noun, describing the noun, or about the verb. All right, so we're going to say, is it an adjective or is it an adverb? Regular exercise, right? So we can then say that that is an adverb. Oh, it's an adjective, sorry. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on adjectives and adverbs, right? We said an adjective, it tells us about a noun, whereas an adverb tells us about a verb. All right, so that is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, Grade 4s, for joining the class. I hope you're going to have a good evening further. Goodbye.